Hello and welcome to Legislative Report. I'm State Representative Greg Lucas. I'm joined with my colleague, Representative Curt Sonney. I thought we'd spend some time to discuss the state budget, both the process and some of the issues in this year's spending plan. Joining us now is Majority Chairman of the House Appropriations Committee, Representative Bill Adolph. Representative Adolph, thank you for being with us today. Curt tells me I'm in for an interesting June. Budget process coming out. Being a freshman, it's the first time I have to go through it. Could you give me an idea what I'm in store for?
Some long hours, but some interesting debate. A lot of information, but I think everything we do up here, all the legislation that's introduced throughout the term, is all based upon our ability to pass a balanced budget on time. And I know Representative Sonney has been around for a couple years now, and he saw the damage that can be done when you don't pass a budget on time. And under this administration and being the majority, we've got those jobs done. Passing a budget on time, because our constituents, whether it be hospitals, whether it be our school districts, whether it be higher ed, I know Edinburgh's in your area, it would be really tough to put, because they don't get any money. If we don't pass a budget, we don't send money out. So those state tax dollars that come into our coffers without a balanced budget, we don't get it done. So the process has started. Our governor came in front of us in early February and presented to us his vision, which I've always called a blueprint, because none of the numbers are for certain. There's never been a governor who's made a proposal that actually became law, because the legislature has an awful lot to say about the budget and the line items, and because I've always felt that we were closer to the people that are paying the money. So it's up to us to get together and pass a responsible, on-time budget.
Well, I understand that about 80% of the budget comes through sales tax and earned income tax, and there are some other ways of getting taxes. Can you tell me about some of those ways?
Sure. So you're absolutely right, Representative, as far as the two main sources of revenue. The PIT, which everybody pays in their paycheck, 3.07%, is the largest revenue source. So small business people, whether they're a sole proprietor or a partnership or even a subchapter S corporation, they're paying that 3.07%. Followed by the sales tax, and that's been a little shaky, to be very honest with you. PIT is very strong right now, but the sales tax is below what we projected. And there's a couple reasons for that. And, Congress passed a law to reduce the FICA that people had withheld from their pay, went from 6.2 to 4.2 for about a 2-year period. Well, starting in January of 2012, it went back up to 6.2. And that took 2% of everybody's gross wages out of the economy. And it was sent to Social Security. Well, that has affected people's extra spending ability. And as a result of that, sales tax revenue has been off. Not to mention new technology. And when I say new technology, and I know none of us would ever do that, but purchase something on the internet, if you purchase merchandise on the internet, most of those services do not charge sales tax. So that's really affected our revenue there. Then we have corporate net income tax, 9.91%, which is one of the highest corporate tax rates in the nation. Supplies us about 9% of our revenue. Then we have capital stock and franchise tax, inheritance taxes, and a lot of fees, that go into the general fund, for a total roughly of about $28.4 billion. a lot of money.
It's a lot of money. That's
A
for
lot
sure.
of money.
One of the challenges I know that we faced for several years now are just simply meeting projections, even though we have projected revenues in a very modest way. And it looks like yet again, for what I believe would be the 5th year in a row, we are not going to meet projections, that we will end the year in a deficit. And so again, we are going to be dealing with having to make, possibly having to make cuts, at least from the proposal of the governor.
Yeah. Representative, you are absolutely correct. The only thing that I would change in that statement is that our projections that we made back in July was very close to what reality is going to be. Probably as close as $10 million to our $28 billion budget. So our projections were pretty accurate. Unfortunately, when the governor started this year's budget process, his proposal, and I understand where he came from, his proposal increased revenue by a couple $100 million. And he did that really because when he went to that podium in February, we were about $100 million ahead. However, the way they project the revenues, almost immediately, February was down, March was down, April was a little of ahead, and now May is also sluggish. So the Independent Fiscal Office, which was created several years ago, they have analyzed the revenues, and they are projecting exactly what Representative Sonney has talked about a $230 million deficit. So, and the governor based his 2013-2014 budget on that inflated revenue source and added about 1.4 revenue growth. Mm-hmm. So now we have a $500 million gap. Mm-hmm. But what I do, and I go back that the governor's budget proposal was a blueprint based upon 8 months worth of information. We have always had an advantage over the governor because we don't do a budget until the 12th month. So we can do our budget based upon actual revenue, and we can base our expenses on those actual revenues. So when we're looking at our budgets, we're going to be comparing our budget with last year's budget, not the governor's proposal.
Well, we've already talked about the income coming from earned income tax and sales tax, about being 80%, and also on the spending end of it, 80% of that is on education and on public welfare programs. So that's a big chunk of the budget there. What other things do we spend money on?
Well, the third, you're absolutely correct. I mean, education is about 40% when you go from pre-K to higher ed. Okay, state universities, our 4 state-related universities, our public school system, transportation on the with the education, and public welfare department is the fastest growing line item in our budget. And Representative Sonney was here when we had to decrease that department by about $1 billion 2 years ago as a result of loss of federal stimulus money, okay? And we were able to point to an awful lot of errors, abuse, fraud that was brought to our attention through audits, and we've been able to control expenses. But a lot of this is federal mandates that we have to spend X amount of dollars on certain individuals. A lot of this stuff is hospital related as well. You know, it's not always the food stamp program or the cash assistance program, which we actually eliminated last year. this is an awful lot of expenses for the disabled, and we try to make sure that those that are handicapped, either mentally or physically, receive the money that they need in order to exist. And nursing homes, whether it be a public nursing home run by your counties, or whether it be private nursing homes where, you know, the nursing home's receiving a Social Security check for their payment. So we have to make up for that money. But the other line items is Department of Transportation, Department of Corrections, you know, obviously DCNR, DEP, you know, makes up the other 60%, or the other 20%. So education and Department of Welfare are the two big ones that we do. But you know, they're all very costly.
Well, it seems that if something's going to get cut, it's probably going to get cut out of that 80%, and that seems to be an issue with a lot of people in those areas. I know higher education was expected to get about what, $100 million extra this year.
Higher education, Representative Lucas, is actually level funded, which is actually a good start for them, because the first couple years they received you know, 20%, 15% decreases. So they're at level funded, and for those folks in your area, I think that's where they're going to stay. I think what the 14 state-related education institutions receive, that's what they're going to get. The 4 state-related universities are going to get what they got last year, level funded. The governor has proposed about a $90 million increase for basic education.
That's what, yeah.
Okay, and we're going to be introducing a budget in the near future. I'm going to say within the next week or two. All right, and I think you're going to see our public school system receiving, you know, at least that. So it should be very interesting.
There was wasn't there a little possible increase for pre-K also?
Yes, yeah. The proposals that the governor introduced shows a substantial increase for the pre-K programs and the Head Start programs.
A lot of studies show that that's a area that really needs to be taken care of for early development.
Well, you know, the earlier you can get to these kids, especially these kids in these poor neighborhoods, and you know, their parents are, you know, could be both working, or could be a single mom, you know, type situation. You know, if you get them to a daycare where they're also learning and being able to pick up social skills and so forth, in the long run, it will pay off. I have some military people that came up with this unbelievable percentage, and I want to share it with you guys, because I really found it hard to believe, but they're swearing to it that 75% of our high school graduates are not eligible to join the military.
Wow.
Because of either criminal records, lack of a GED, okay, or some type of a disability, okay. So that's hard to believe. I would think it was probably 25%. You know, but I went to a meeting last week. It's 75%. So that's an unbelievable statistic, and I throw that out because I hope someone comes up and says, no, that information is incorrect. But it is, you know, they're standing by it.
Well, back when I went to school, if you got in trouble, they threw in the Army. That was your choice, jail or the Army. So I guess that must not be the choice nowadays.
Well, yeah, the qualifications are a little different today than when we got out of high school, you know, because I certainly do remember that story, you know. You know, that was the option.
Yeah, right.
You're either going to get written up or join the Army.
Let's take a short break. Legislative report. We'll return in a moment.
Did you know that Violet Oakley was the first female artist to receive a large commission for artwork done in a United States Capitol building? In 1902, Joseph Houston, designer and architect for the 3rd Harrisburg Capitol building, commissioned Violet Oakley to paint murals for the governor's reception room. He believed that Oakley's contribution would add interest to the building and act as an encouragement of women of the state. Prior to beginning her work for the Capitol, Oakley set out to England to conduct research for her murals. Upon return, she decided to center her artwork on William Penn and the founding of Pennsylvania. Oakley made sure that Penn's ideals of justice and peace could be seen throughout her work. In 1906, she completed 13 murals titled The Founding of the State of Liberty Spiritual and was placed in sequential order around the governor's reception room. These murals were some of the first to be installed in the Capitol. When Edwin Austin Abbey, another artist for the Capitol, died in 1911, Oakley was offered another opportunity to create murals for the unfinished Senate and Supreme Court chambers. Her work on the Senate murals, including International Understanding, was completed by 1919. Oakley then completed the Supreme Court murals, including the Divine Law, by 1927. Oakley is said to be the principal artist for the Capitol, with a total of 43 murals on display. She remains one of the greatest muralists in the United States. Now you know.
Welcome back to the program. The state budget is a topic of our discussion. I'm Representative Greg Lucas, here with Representative Curt Sonney and our guest Appropriations Chairman Bill Adolph.
You know, part of the budget process, which we all know comes to a head on June 30th of every year, we oftentimes have other what we might consider high-level bills or initiatives that governors have most generally brought forward, and these always seem to kind of roll in with the budget in one way or another. And we all know that three of the very big initiatives that Governor Corbett has been trying to address are the transportation issue, pensions, and privatization of the liquor stores. Now, of course, for the House, we have passed a bill dealing with privatization and sent it to the Senate. We have not addressed transportation or pension funding yet. Maybe you could comment on that.
Well, there are major issues. I would say more than half the privatization bill, that was the first vote since Prohibition on the privatization of liquor stores. So we were all part of a pretty historic vote there. And you know, I think the residents of Pennsylvania you know, will appreciate the convenience that privatizing their wine and spirit stores will bring them in years to come. And I think based upon the figures that I have seen, that the revenue just going from 600 state-owned stores to 1,200 privately owned stores statewide, common sense will tell you that eventually they're going to sell more wine and liquor, which will bring in more revenues for the state. But the main thing is the convenience. I mean, 48 other states do it. You know, private owners own taverns, private owners own beer distributors. Why can't private owners own wine and spirit stores? So I think when it's all said and done, I think we'll be able to get that done. I'm not sure by June 30th, Representative, but we're not going to hold up the budget based upon a privatization of liquor stores. You know, we have a constitutional requirement to get the budget done. It's been quite a few years since Prohibition, so you know, if we can get this done, you know, in the fall, or you know, if it happens to get done in June, I'm all for it. So that's how that privatization bill will go. Transportation, you know, transportation is a little different. We have been hearing from our Secretary of Transportation, and I believe Governor Corbett did a commission on our public transportation needs. And we're really talking about capital improvements, our highways and our bridges. We have an awful lot of bridges that, engineers, I'll use their terminology, structurally deficient, okay? And that means more than just need a paint job, so we need to put some money towards that, and the governor has a plan to do that, and the Senate takes a little further. The Senate has introduced a bill. One goes for like $1.8 billion, the other one for about $2.5 billion.
One thing about transportation is, first off, the longer you put off doing the maintenance on these roads and bridges and stuff, the more money it's going to cost in the long run. The other thing is it puts people to work, not only the people who are actually doing the work themselves, but the contractors that supply the concrete, the asphalt, the steel, the wood, the machinery that does the work. So that's going to put people back to work and give us some more money in earned income tax, as well as sales tax.
That's a very good point. It's an economic development projects all over the Commonwealth, and it probably hasn't been since maybe the Ridge administration where we've had a full-fledged transportation plan. So that's something that I'm sure we're going to be working on. The Senate, it passed out of the Senate Transportation Committee. The Senate's supposed to be voting on that, in the next couple of weeks. So it's going to come over to us, and then we'll all have our 2 cents to say about it. It's uncapping the petroleum wholesale tax for the distributors, and it will affect some of the gas prices, but it should be trickled down a little bit. And but people understand if their bridges are going to be fixed, and you talk about the cost, but what I always worry about is the public safety aspect of it. I certainly don't want any Pennsylvania residents driving around our state's highways and bridges a tragedy happens. So, we have to take that very serious, and I think we will. Then there's some mass transit part of it. I mean, we have in my area, I have 1 million people a day riding public transportation, and they have some capital improvement needs as well. So that's all will be debated and all discussed. But once again, very important issue that the governor has put on the table. He would like to see it get done by June 30th, but it's not being leveraged by the governor that the budget's not going to get done unless you do that. So,
well, it's by no means a new issue for those of us that have been around for a little while. We tried dealing with this once before. It was Act 44, I believe, tolling Interstate 80. That was a failed attempt. We're still living under those requirements of Act 44, and those are putting a strain on the Turnpike Commission and payments that they have to make. And
question about it, Curt. So we need to get something done, that was something that the previous administration tried to do, despite the warnings that if you're going to toll interstates, the money has to stay on the interstates. You can't take the money from the tolling of the interstates and put it towards mass transit or put it towards any other place. And whether it was the Bush administration that turned Pennsylvania down or whether it was the Obama administration that turned Pennsylvania down, that's the way the federal government operates. And you can understand that. You can understand that.
Another heavy lift we're going to have is the state pensions. Figures somewhere around $42 to $45 billion underfunded. That's more than our whole entire state budget for 1 year. So
yes,
there's going to have to be some changes made in that if we're going to balance that out.
Yeah, and that's not going to happen overnight. The problem wasn't caused overnight. Obviously, 2008 stock market crash had a lot to do with it. I also believe that some of the legislation that was passed in the good years in the 1990s and early 2000s had something to do with it. But generally speaking, generally speaking, the only way you take care of an unfunded liability is you have to throw some cash at it. And the employees, certainly not their fault. There was a couple years that school districts and the state did not make the proper employer contributions. And they used the earnings that the investments were making in order to make the contribution. And that's when the stock market was doing great. Now, fortunately for us right now, we're in the up market again. But it takes, more than just 1 year, an up market. It's going to take several years. But the governor has put together a proposal, okay? Won't affect any retirees, okay? None of the current retirees will be affected. The governor's proposal, and I don't know whether this can even become law, because I don't know if you can take away current employees' benefits, and that's always a court challenge. And Representative Sonney, we listened to the state Supreme Court talk about that when they came in front of us. You're asking folks to make a vote on something that we're not sure is constitutional. So that's a question that we have.
The bottom line, though, is if we don't do something, there may not be a retirement for people to go to.
No question about it. And there's ways that we can do it. I mean, I think new employees. I know there's a defined contribution plan being offered instead of a defined benefit plan, and that has its advantages. And I think you see private industry going towards that. But in the meantime, we still have to find a way to get cash to that unfunded liability.
And I think that's probably the most important point of the whole pension issue, is the fact the only way out of it is to put the money in it. There is no easy fix to it whatsoever.
That's
it takes money.
Correct. It takes money.
Well, as far as the budget goes, we can only spend as much money as we bring in, and there's only really a couple ways to make money. So your only choice is you have to either make more money or you have to raise taxes, and no one wants to raise taxes.
That's true. I mean, we're trying to pass legislation that creates jobs, and we're giving incentives to employers to hire folks. And I know down in my area, we have an awful lot of oil refineries, and there was approximately 2,200 jobs saved as a result of direct input from the state. And even down in the southeast, we benefit from some of the Marcellus shale natural gas because of the pipeline going, and we're turning refineries into natural gas exporters now. So we got to get Pennsylvania back to work. I mean, that's
right there.
That's the main thing. Get Pennsylvania back to work, and that's what we're trying to do. We can't raise taxes on our working people right now, and that's one commitment that we all want to keep to. But we know running state government is expensive because of our state police and our roads and our highways and so forth, and our education. Because you need a good education.
Right.
That's all the time we have for today's program. If you need assistance with any state government matter, please feel free to contact us at our local offices or through our websites. That information will be shown in a moment. Thanks for watching, and please join us the next time for Legislative Report.